me introduce Mark Krenzel, Certification Manager for Dynon Avionics. Mark, we just spent a great conversation with Kirk Kleinholz talking about how this all happened. Well, you're the regulation certification black magic guy. You're the guy who tells us how it gets done. Tell me right now, what is certification according to Dynon? How did this occur? Because right now there's this whole controversy versus certification versus not so certification.
Correct.
And it's an interesting game because what really it's about is changes in attitudes within the FAA.
And that's really what the basis of it is. It's like, 10 years ago, the FAA looked at this accident rate in the general aviation population, and it was quite high, it was stagnant, and then it started coming down, and then they kind of looked at it and it's like, well, it's coming down because people are getting tablets and getting a little more situational awareness. And
having more info.
And so they started thinking maybe there's better ways to bring the stuff that's been in air transports and business jets and higher end airplanes down into the lower general aviation population and try to get some of those safety features in there. And so they started looking at redoing the regs with the help of the AEA and numerous other people. And so they started looking at also that, the TSO process has been in place for pretty much since the birth of federal regulations, and some of them go back in the 50s. And so they started looking at, well, not all TSOs fit all the market. And so they started thinking of better ways to comply with the federal regulations and still provide a safe product. And so the other thing that happened is, I think, is that, for the longest time we always looked in avionics, and I've been doing this for about well over 30 years. I worked
a new guy.
Yeah, a new guy. So I worked in, I come from Boeing, so I'm used to the big iron.
Oh, are you really?
Worked on 747, 400s, 5767s. Kind of went down into the business jet world for a long time.
Boeing. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going.
And so then I kind of went over and did general aviation and jets, and I've always been a pilot since about 1985. And so I've been flying airplanes for quite a while and experience there. And I always wondered why, here I'm flying steam gauges, but yet I work in an industry that has the latest gee-whiz technology. And so when I started looking at this, it's like, okay, how can we take the TSO, some of the best parts of it, were still applicable to
the stuff that works.
And blend that with safety. And so what I did is take my knowledge of the certification world that I've been in for all my career and figure out what's the best pieces of that fit the general aviation, and how does our Dynon product fit into that. And so, we worked really closely with the FAA to establish really good practices for compliance to the regulations. We did do environmental testings to the DO-160G where applicable, and we did a lot of flight testing with the FAA and for human factors. And so we went, they did a really good study of our system as we went through our TI test flights and stuff, and we came away with a huge, I won't say a number of issues, but a lot of things that we can improve on. And we actually went back and looked at all those improvements and go, they almost all made sense.
Yeah.
And so we leveraged off the experience that the FAA does bring to it and seasoned pilots, and we improved our product. And so the certified product we have today is even better than the experimental that we had before, and it was very good. I mean, it's been flying in the experimental world, tens of thousands of airplanes for 15, 20 years now. So,
if you could describe the process when you sit down with the FAA and say, this is our ambition, this is what we want to do, we want to bring a product to the certified community. What did that look like? Look at the calendar, look at the missions that were required, look at the tests that they set aside for you, and explain to us just the working protocol of building the next generation Dynon Avionics systems.
So what we did was we sat down early on in the process, and this is pre-me. I've actually only been a part of this company for 6 months. And so a lot of this groundwork and the foundation was put in place long before I came aboard. But what we did is we came up with the certification plan. We sat down with the FAA. We had very good buy-in from what's now used to be the Small Aircraft Directorate.
Right.
It's changed, but And they sat down and go, okay.
Good folks too.
We came up with our plan, we gave it to them, and then we kept refining it and say, okay, well, you need to do a little bit more better job in your software testing, or you need to do a better job in your environmental testing. And we pretty much took that and we put it into our plans, and also we put it into our test procedures and what we plan to do for compliance, and we put that back in front of the FAA to say, is this satisfactory, or is this meet the letter of the regulation or compliance of the regulation? And so it was a back and forth. It was a very collaborative effort for a while, and then finally, they said, okay, no, that looks really good. You're meeting all the intents and you're complying with that particular regulation.
The people that you were working with within the FAA, did they have kind of a conscious understanding of just how big a deal this was going to be and where it was going to go in the future?
I think most of them did. I think some of them struggled because they'd been working in even the Part 25 world for so long that it was a real stretch for them to kind of adapt and be innovative in being able to apply new techniques and novel approaches to getting certification, still keeping a safe product. And so, but they learned while we learned. So I kind of took the Dynon people who were embedded in the experimental world, but did a really good job. I mean, and then just kind of take the best of the certified world and says, okay, we just need to do a better job of how we're going to do our testing, make sure it's all formalized and execute it that way.
It used to be that anything that was done in the experimental world, whether it be airframes, avionics, power plants, no matter how much time was built up or how much expertise, was pretty much worthless in a certified world. It required adaptation from the FAA as well as from the community to meet in the middle. When you set the task before you, was this a situation where the FAA said, this is the way it's done? Or was it a matter of, this is what we need to accomplish, how are we going to get there?
It was the latter.
Excellent.
So it was really, this is what we were trying to achieve,
Yeah.
and they worked with us to come with how to do it. So
the interesting thing is the people we've talked to all the way up to 800 Independence Ave indicates that this was top down, that there was a strong conscious objective that it was important to achieve an objective rather than insist on, well, that's the way we've always done it, which to me is the phrase I keep using as the downfall of aviation. So interesting stuff, to say the least. So as it stands right now, the certified product gets to do what? Define that for us.
So as far as functionality, okay, so right now we were able to, we pretty much under our current STC, we did our flagship Skyview HDX, which includes synthetic vision, terrain, moving maps.
Beautiful box, by the way.
And if you have, and also in ours we have in and out ADS-B as part of the package. So you get in addition, you get the weather and the traffic along with that. And then we have a 3-axis autopilot system that was certified as part of the STC as well. And we also, this is probably the most engine-equipped or engine monitor system we have. So we're monitoring all for 172, where you not only get a temperature, oil pressure, and oil temperature gauge. We have all that, plus we have all the EGT temperatures and AGT and CHT temperatures from all the cylinders and fuel flow, and so we get all that capability there. So you get.
You're also trend monitoring, aren't you?
We are doing. We also do some trend monitoring on that system. So.
Super. The certification path so far and what you've achieved is one thing. To add aircraft to it, to expand on what you're doing, and to innovate and improve or modify the product in the future, what's that going to take?
So I think we were able to get most of the 172s.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
More 172s than anything.
And the joke in the office is I happen to own a 1977 172 XP.
There you go.
And it's not on the list.
Oh no, that's right. Okay.
And so, it's not going to take much to get it on the list, but so it's highly on my motivational list to get it on there. Yeah. And so, but I'm going through that process right now. So we're working out agreements with the FAA to make sure that we understand that. And the biggest one is the autopilot. It's like how the CFIS interfaces with most airplanes is the same. And so that is, evaluation is fairly small. Just like our other people have been up here in the last couple days, it's like we're going through the same things about servo. You know, when we put our autopilot servos in other models of airplanes, you have to do all the engineering to do that, and then you've got to go flight test to make sure that our autopilot performs well in those airframes, and you demonstrate that to the FAA. So.
What is the process now for adding other airplanes? How intensive is that?
It's very intensive. So all my focus right now is switched from getting the STC to working with the FAA and getting people on board to give us their airplane for a little while and get those airplanes done in big chunks of models. So over the next few months, we're going to be adding quite a few different models of airplanes. We're also doing, we kind of have a sister STC that was at Oshkosh, which we're doing a Baron as. We're also looking at doing some other twin engines at the same time.
If you really wanted to make points with me, you'd have done the twin Comanche Man.
Okay.
I'd have been a customer sooner.
On my list. And so, it's like, it's just a matter of our capacity, because I have kind of, the story is like the good news and the bad news. The good news is we got the STC, and the bad news we got the STC, and now we have to execute it. And
now we got to work for it.
Now we got to work for it. So.
Outstanding. Now, I realize that there's a lot of airplanes out there, and over a period of time, as you gain traction from type to type and type group to type group, it gets easier from the standpoint of how the FAA will require a certain amounts of testing and background and data accumulation and so forth. How long a process do you see right now till you're representing most of the demand that you see within the fleet?
It's hard to tell. We're still learning, and I don't have a really good sense for that yet. I'm hoping over the next year or so we'll have almost all the target airplanes we're going to add, and there's a lot of them.
This is not the kind of project where you can just, hey, 1 AML to go, please. Yeah, doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen that way. And so,
bummer.
And the other thing we're doing is that we're kind of slow rolling it a little bit, because we want to make the installation process really slick.
You got to my next question. Excellent.
And so, what we've been doing is, like, we don't think it's good enough just to have the product available for installing airplanes. We want to make sure that when we have people are installing it, it's almost a plug and play, so that you get with our system, it's pretty much data bus across itself. So you get the mounting hardware, you get the cabling, you get pretty much everything you need to take out your old panel, put in a new panel, and wire it up. And my target is less than a week.
Damn.
It's not there yet, but that's the target, and I think it's achievable. So.
It's funny, better part of a decade ago, I was one of the first adopters of R9 with Avidyne. One of the most really well-designed systems, especially in regards to the interface that we've seen so far. And we're excited about the fact that people are paying more and more attention to how these systems are utilized, the people, the man-machine interface, so to speak. So the obvious question is, how does this certification really affect the future of the improvements, the modifications, the upgrades you want to make, and especially in regards to how it interfaces with the pilot?
So I think we've done it, through the experimental world, we've done a really good job with our user interface and providing that.
And you have, no question.
And so we're continuing to look at that, is how, one of the big things I'm trying to drive is better, more consistent human factors, because using some of the best lessons learned from the big guys of how to approach your analysis of doing human factors and workloads in the cockpit to try to drive that into the little guy. And we're also very conscientious of the fact that, I'm a fairly low time pilot, and I haven't been in an airplane for a little while. I don't want to be stumbling around with things, and so we're always looking at different ways and better ways to expedite or improve that user interface. And we have it on our touch screen in a very innovative ways. Like, I've just started flying our system quite a bit, and so I'm really amazed, because I've done touch screens and you're in turbulence and you're trying to just get your airplane down on the ground, and you're trying to fumble for something and you miss it.
Not good.
And not good. And so ours has both interfaces. It's got the knobs are the primary means, but you always have the shortcuts. So if you want to do a heading, you can just tap on the heading bug, and it gives you that information.
One final question. It's kind of a, excuse me, kind of a tough one in a way, because you put all this effort into certification. You put a tremendous amount of effort into building a bridge to the rest of the industry. However, as an experimental avionics manufacturer, when you wanted to make a change, it was pretty easy because you just went out, did it from the standpoint of internal testing and everything, of course. But you went out and did what you needed to do to make things work effectively. Have you lost something in getting to this level of certification?
I don't think so. So
Excellent.
We're putting the processes. We put the processes in place as part of getting our PMA and everything to try to get our quality systems to the ability to the point that we can actually do minor, major modifications. We've got minor, major modification agreements in place with the FAA, so we're really clear on what processes if we make a change. There is some education on the experimental team that I'm always fighting a little bit, because it's like they are used to that. But you know, good engineering is like, whether it's in the experimental world or the certified world, is controlled change. And so it slows you down a little bit, but it's not, that slowdown is not always a bad thing.
Excellent. Mark, I can't thank you enough. I'll tell you
Thank
what,
you.
It's nice talking to one of the pros, especially with all the buzz in the industry about what it's going to mean and how it's going to affect, and oh yeah, can it help my shop sell, you know, gear and equipment and installations. So being able to talk to somebody from your end of the business, really helpful.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 61st Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Las Vegas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Are you stall smart? Ever since Orville and Wilbur took to the skies, pilots have been taught that the more airspeed you have, the better off you are. But over the last 100+ years, we've learned that's not always the case. Take stalls, for example. The common belief is that if you have sufficient airspeed, the aircraft won't stall. The fact is, an airfoil always stalls at the same critical angle of attack in relation to the relative airflow, regardless of airspeed, configuration, or weight. Learn more at aspenavionics.com.
True Blue Power Advanced Lithium-Ion Mainship batteries feature proprietary nanophosphate technology. They deliver 3 times the energy density and are more than 40% lighter than lead-acid or NiCad alternatives. RTCA tested, FAA certified, available to OEMs today.